On tour, we believe that there's a number of conversations worth having. And one of those conversations I'm going to have today with Danny Tang, who's the Worldwide Channel Transformation Solutions Leader for IBM and one of the self-professed and acclaimed thought leaders in this space over the years. Thanks for having the opportunity to talk to us, Danny. First question I have for you is around this idea of you have the Accentures and you have the Deloittes, and they have three roles that they specify for branches. Typically, it's a digital engagement channel, moving people to digital stuff. It's a sales channel, or it's an advisory channel. And typically, as I see it, they stop trying to do financial transaction processing. Now, in my mind, I'm wondering, is this genius or is this a mistake? Are they losing an opportunity to cross-sell, get people into their branches? Or is it the fact that with the digital channels, they've moved on so they don't need to do it in the branch? Do you think it's the right thing to do to forget about it?
So yeah, some consulting firms do like to talk about cross-selling, but unfortunately, that is the thinking of the past decade, right? So if you think about the role of branches, in the past, branches were about transactions, right? And starting in the 90s and the 2000s, a lot of people are talking about changing the branches from being the center of transactions to the center of sales. Well, guess what? That didn't work out, right? So we work with some of the largest banks in the world, and remember one of the major banks in the US, I sat down with the managing director responsible for the branch network. The first question she asked is, heck, my branches are empty. What do I do? If you don't have that, the transactions traffic, you don't have anybody in the branches. Who are you going to sell to, right? So the model of positioning branches as sales center has not worked, and it won't work, right? So nowadays, the new thinking is that the branches should be the center of client relationship, right? So whatever the customers want, we satisfy the customer's needs. Of course, along the way, you want to nudge the customer a little bit, right? Yeah, maybe not for tailored transactions. We'll teach you how to do it yourself, right? But the branches should be the center of your client relationship. Definitely not just about sales, cross-selling. That hasn't worked.
Sure. So the way I would put that is manage the relationship, not manage the sale, right?
And when you take care of the relationship, sales will come, right?
Exactly. It might not be straight away. It might be down the line. Relationship is a longer standing and a more rewarding investment, I think, to be done that. But at the same time, I'm wondering, have the branches or the institutions that push the transaction out of the branch, are they losing that ability to build a branch if the transactions people aren't coming in for the transactions? That's what you're saying, really?
Yeah. So so you need that traffic from transactions in order to sell, right? So we built a bunch of advisory-only centers for one of the banks in Eastern Europe, and it was very sad. The branches were nicely designed, but on a typical day, you probably have 5 walking customers, right? Who in the world these days will pop into advisory center and say that, hey, give me some advice? No, people don't do that, right? So I dislike the idea of advisory-only branches, right? So you always need to have a mix of transactions and advisory to guarantee that footfall. Now, of course, hopefully, the mix of transactions will be of high end, right? The more complex transactions, not just cash deposits or check deposits.
Yeah, you push those to the digital channels, the mobile devices and what have you. So if you have that sort of selection of services then, advisory, transaction-based, sales, problem solving, there seems to be a trend now to have this concept of the universal banker. So you walk into the branch, and whether it's a concierge person or a greeter, they deal with you no matter what the problem is or what the request is. But But I wonder, is that really a model that works? Because if you think about your segment size, you've got several segment size, and eventually with digitization, we're getting to a point of segment size of one because we have to personalize everything, right? And that's an expectation of customers now. So when they go into a branch and they're greeted by a universal banker, can realistically that universal banker solve all of their requests, deal with all of their pain points, and move on in a satisfactory level? Considering the amount of training that they have to get, the amount of product knowledge they might need to have, the amount of just general sales and customer relationship skills that they have. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to put all of those things into one person, and I don't know if that works. Does it? In your experience, has that worked anywhere?
So universal banker is a lot of hype, but there's no such thing as 100% universal, because a lot of roles you need special license, right? You need to pass a lot of certification. Nobody can do that. But we do see a general trend of declining headcounts, right? The number of employees in the branches is declining, right? So you must move towards multi-skilled employees, right? And you complement that with using video, so that you can still provide the
experts at a distance,
the services that the people in the branch, physically in the branch, don't have, right? So universal banker is a model that that's really inevitable, right? You definitely need to do that as you shrink the size of your branches.
For sure. So is it fair to say then that the universal banker is more a concierge who is more so about pointing you in the right direction rather than actually solving any of the problems or requests that you have?
Well, they do whatever the customer wants to do.
Yeah.
So the general customer service, account opening, handling transactions. What's the business value, right? So number one, obviously, it's easier to schedule time with when you have universal bankers versus having 5 different roles in the branches, right? So that it's much easier to schedule time for branch managers. That's number one. The second major benefit is referral, right? No need for referral. Because in a typical branch, when you try to cross-sell over the counter, the customer say, yeah, sure, why not? Oh, you go over there, somebody will be with you. Well, most of the time, the customer turns around and left. Right? So with universal banker, you don't need to have that referral. Yeah.
You maintain that conversation from the entrance
can take care of the sales part. So those are the 2 major benefits. But of course, it comes with the cost, right? You have to pay for the training, you have to pay for the higher salary. But on the soft side, it also gives your tellers a better career path, right?
Yeah.
If it works, it works.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're complementing the increase in salary with the decrease in numbers. So it's an offset. So just a third question for you, and to kind of shift gears a little bit, is to ask whether or not you think that in a branch transformation or the digitization of the experience that the customer has, is it essential to have an up-to-date core? Is technology a limiting factor at a core level rather than at the cold face, if you like, of the customer interaction? And if that's the case, if it's not the case that you need a new core system, is it possible to potentially do some quick wins with technology or branch design that allow you to get 10 steps forward with the 80-20 rule? We can do 20% of the overall cost of the budget, but we're going to get 80% of the gains. Is there anything like that you could recommend on a technology point of view?
Of course, there are quick wins banks can do. For example, shrinking the size of branches, that's a quick win. You can usually get that done rather quickly. Channel migration is another major source of business value I talked about. And it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to have anything to do with technology. It's about education, right? But it's always nice to have a solid technological foundation
yeah.
for doing things more efficiently, right? For example, streamlining your business processes, getting rid of the forms, paperless. All these requires a good architecture as the basis. I wouldn't go as deep as changing the core banking, right?
Sure.
Rather, what we want to do is we want to cut the front office from the back office, right? So these days, we like to talk about two-speed IT, right? So at the channel layer, mobile, internet banking, branch, you want to change rather rapidly, right? And you want to cut the front office from the back office, because in core banking, you want to keep the core banking very stable. You definitely don't want to have an update every
changes
couple weeks.
Risk.
Yeah. So that kind of the two-speed IT is what a lot of banks try to do.
Okay, that makes sense to a large extent, but it kind of plays into then the question around this, what has been an industry standard word now for the last 10 years, is this omnichannel approach. So is it possible to get omnichannel if you don't have a core system that's capable of delivering?
So omnichannel is, I would say, 90% hype. So a lot of people like to say, well, you want to allow customers to jump from one channel to the other channel. For what? Why? Right? There are only several business processes that would require you to allow customers to jump from one channel to the next channel. What are the processes? Well, account opening is one of them. Mortgage application, credit card application. What else?
So long life type.
Yeah, the long-lived
processes.
transactions. A bill payment from one channel to the next channel, what's the point, right? Mm-hmm. So there are only several things you want to do for that channel switching, right? And of course, you want to have a consistent user experience, but that has nothing to do with omnichannel. Right? So omnichannel to me is more hype than real, unfortunately.
For sure, yeah, I tend to agree with you, but I do think that there is an element of, at least in every channel, being able to access the same information.
Oh,
whether it's
yes.
not processes, but
right.
doing it that
but
way.
Banks have been doing that before they coined the term omnichannel, right? So you always want to consolidate. If you have 5 customer information files, you want to consolidate them into one, right? If you have 2 core banking systems, you want to have one, right? That consolidation should always happen. And it's been happening in the industry for a long time.
Okay, so hype. You heard it here first, right?